Let's see, we have one more person coming in.
How's everybody doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Sorry, I'm taking just a second here because I've been handed over the host responsibilities, and I'm making sure that we get everyone included in the meeting who's requesting, and it's a little bit of a distraction in the beginning here.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I think we've got everyone.
And if I shared the agenda too early, I can always pop it down.
No, that's great. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. We've got all 5 members, so we have a full quorum. Let's run through we'll run through things as crisply as we can here. Near-term committee calendar is the first item of business. And we had agreed to go to 2-week meeting every 2 weeks for the first 3 months, beginning in December, because there's a lot of groundwork to lay. So we have been doing that, except we took an extra week off during the holidays. One consequence is that we were in a good meeting phasing with the select board, where we would meet shortly after they met, and then we'd have time to work on things and prepare them in case we needed to take it to the select board on their agenda. We're now out of phase. And so one thing we talked about doing is adjusting our meeting schedule so we got back in phase. The one topic we have on our agenda today is alternative routes, and we'll still cover that to an extent, but we will add a working meeting next Friday, and of course it will be open, an open meeting just like today. And and then we'll proceed with having a meeting every 2 weeks, starting next Friday. So it'll seem like we're having an extra meeting, but it will be taking one agenda item from today and moving it to next week, after some introductory comments this week. So that's the intent, and then from that point on, we'll go every 2 weeks, and then we'll be back in phase with the select board. So do we, let's see, one other meeting item that I wanted to mention, and that is the Wellfleet community forums are held periodically. There's a nonprofit organization that organizes community forums here in Wellfleet. Pre-COVID, they would meet at the COA and give our residents an opportunity to do a Q&A with various organizations or individuals on topics of interest to the community. And I've contacted them to see if
Pete,
can you hear me?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, it froze and then went on to mute. So the last we heard was that you contacted them.
Yeah, there was looks like I got a connection glitch just as I started talking about that. So I talked to the Wellfleet Community Forum folks. They're interested in connecting with us to do a community forum regarding bikeway issues. And so I wanted to present that idea here to the committee that it would be done virtually, of course, rather than the way they used to do them, which is have everybody get together at the COA one evening for a Q&A session. So I wanted to throw that idea out there. They've asked us if there's a date that we'd prefer to do. The earliest they could do it would be in a few weeks. My thought is that we could do that in a few weeks. What's the interest in doing that?
It sounds very cool. I wonder.
Yeah, I think it sounds great.
Mhm. It seems like it would be very nice to, golly, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what questions people will have and what answers we want to make sure we have available by then. As far, people might be very curious about the alternatives.
Well, in particular, we can, it'll give us a chance to get inputs on in my view, the reason I contacted them was we don't want them to critique. We're not in the business yet. We're not critiquing or analyzing any of the route alternatives yet, but we are collecting ideas on which routes to consider in an analysis. Look about what their interests are and what their recommendations would be on routes, so that we don't leave any out of our analysis. So the purpose of the meeting would not be to assess any candidate routes, but rather to collect new ideas. And also we could answer any questions people have about how we're approaching us in the spirit of being being transparent. Okay, well, if that is the let's talk about potential meeting dates, because they're interested in setting something up. If we were to do this, they would want to do it in a few weeks. I think a few weeks sounds like a good window to get that sort of information collected, from a public meeting. With that said, then I will explore this with them further, and we can talk about it next Friday.
Good.
Yeah.
I can also share information by email with you, but we want to help make sure the word gets out, and so we can talk about it again at our next meeting. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Let me just ask, because I'd rather have a vote than not have one, to be on the safe side. So I move that we change our every other week schedule so that we hold an extra meeting next Friday, in particular to discuss route alternatives, not to critique them, but rather to make sure we've listed all the ones that so far that have occurred to us, and then we'll build on that list through this meeting with the public and with other inputs that we'll be getting. So I move that we change our meeting schedule to meet next week. Anybody second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, sounds unanimous for a meeting next Friday. And I move that we explore with the Wellfleet Forum organization the idea of holding a Wellfleet community forum on Bikeway.
I've lost you at least.
Yeah, I have
me too. I second.
All in favor?
Yeah, we're having a bad connection today. All in favor of Wellfleet Forum? Aye. Okay, great. Okay. That way we just make sure we've covered all the bases and have an opportunity for input. Uh, and excuse me, to the visitors, are there any comments regarding these ideas? Tom, Gary, or Betty?
Nope, no questions.
Okay, wanted to make sure we,
Thank you for asking.
the, moving on. Let's see, Christy, the meeting rules to invite public comment. Could you please cover those?
Sure. The committee invites public comment and input at the end of each agenda item with a 1-minute limit for each speaker. We welcome more feedback through email as well as proposals to the committee that can become future agenda items.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. The other item is open meeting law. Open meeting laws are important to one of our committee objectives, which is to have an open public discourse, to be above board with all that we're discussing and doing. And I went online looking at their various training options, their online training, because we've all been through that training, but refresher is sometimes a good idea. And in addition, it's good to have reference material. So I was able to download the transcript of the online training, which is a few pages, but it's much quicker to read than to watch, as you can imagine. And I emailed that to all the committee members, so you all have that as a reference. I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a good reference, and we want to make sure we're on the right side of those rules as we move forward. So next item is the approval of the minutes. Christy, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
I have a phone message happening right now, sorry.
I could move to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
I second.
Okay, so motion is to approve the minutes as they were drafted. All in favor?
I
Aye. Great.
thank you. Sorry
Given
about
that we have,
that.
given that we have a meeting coming up so quickly, can you just send those minutes to the town after this meeting, and hopefully they'll be able to
Absolutely.
get
I'll send
posted.
them today.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I'd love to get them posted so people have a chance to look at them as a reference before we hold our next meeting in just a week. Okay. Committee organization. We like to cover our committee's charge at the beginning of each meeting as a reminder of why we're meeting. And so let me read that real quickly here. In accordance with the Wellfleet Town Charter, the Board of Selectmen hereby establishes the Bike and Walkway Committee as an ad hoc committee with the following charge. The Bike and Walkways Committee is hereby established to consider ways to provide safe areas for biking and walking. The Board of Selectmen believes that these activities should be available seasonally and year-round, as they are an important means of local transportation or popular activities in the town and promote good health. The Bike and Walkways Committee is charged with the following tasks. 1, to work with the Cape Cod National Seashore, the towns of Provincetown and Truro, and the Cape Cod Commission to establish the continuation of the bike trail northward into Provincetown. 2, to prepare a plan for future bike and walking routes through the town of Wellfleet. Okay, that's our guidance, so to speak, our charge from the town select board. Next item on the agenda is our committee's near-term objectives. We've talked about those at each of our past meetings to get ideas together, and really looking at goals and objectives to go. We have said is 6-month goals. So we started talking about these in December. Here we are at the beginning of January. I'd propose that we call them goals through the 30th of June. 6-month goals from this point. So far, we have some inputs. I'll go over 4 that we discussed at the last meeting, and the reason because we've had several weeks to gather inputs on these goals and to have some discussion on it at our last 2 meetings. So the committee goals that we've discussed in the past. 1, maintain transparency in community efforts and communications. 2nd, engage town and external agencies in accomplishment of our committee's charge. 3, conduct an analysis of alternatives for a bikeway route through Wellfleet toward Truro. 4th, actively support the select board in teaming with state agencies, the Cape Cod Commission, and the National Seashore regarding bikeway issues. Any discussion of those 4 topics?
I think they sound great. And I was just thinking about our charge and the fact that we're also collecting alternatives, and I didn't know if it made sense to just put that in the list.
Collecting the fact that we're collecting
I
alternatives.
just
Let's
wondered
see.
about, how this relates to the charge and if we need to repeat that or not. It's clear that that's one of our serious short-term goals, to collect and name the alternatives. They were going to conduct an analysis, so it's very obvious that we are doing that, but I just didn't know if you guys wanted to put that on there.
Okay, well, let's discuss it. I think it's great to point out. I would suggest that that's covered under the conduct an analysis of alternatives for bikeway routes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We could
Although maybe since we're doing a lot of outreach to the community as part of that, maybe it should be listed kind of separately.
How about this? Because number 2 was engage town and external agencies in accomplishment of our committee's charge. Should we add and the public?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Christy, it's great input. Would that cover it for you?
That's great. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's on our draft here, we'll include those words. I wanted to propose one other one. And this goes back to the idea that in addition to the planning role that we're playing, we're also doing some community outreach in the form of, for instance, the event that Christy, you were researching with the police department and others that was similar to what was hosted in 2019, that community event. So another potential near-term objective, because we talk about doing this sometime in the early summer, I believe we were going to revisit in March, is develop community cycling safety awareness. Is that a topic you'd like to see included with our near-term objectives or goals?
I think so. I feel like definitely I consider that. It's funny because you start thinking about it and you say, well, that's just one of our permanent goals. So how do we differentiate between near term and permanent?
Great point. If it's something that we envision organizing in the next 6 months, say by the end of June, then I would say let's include it in our near-term goals. If it's something that we think is going to go beyond that, in terms of scheduling, then I'd say we hold this as one of our long-term goals. What are your thoughts?
My intention is that that's Oh, yeah. My intention is that that would be a yearly event, and I have like a little commitment issues, just not knowing what the world will be like in June. I'm assuming it will be really ideal and we'll do it. So that's the plan, minus those commitment issues, just not knowing. I want it to be really safe and very local. So this
Yeah.
year,
Okay.
I
So
don't know if that answered.
I lost
what
part of
I was
the
saying.
I lost part of the audio in your answer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I was just saying my intention for that is that it's a yearly event and that it's just really solidly annual. And the only reason we didn't do
Okay.
it last year, does that make sense?
okay. Well, the nice thing about having near-term goals is that we can revisit them. They're not written in stone. They're just they're kind of our own guiding light as we're going forward here in the next few months. Given that that is on hold, an argument can be made that we consider that just as part of our long-term, our ongoing work. And that what we keep focused on here is within the next 6 months, where's the focus of our energy, which is to do those other 4. So unless there's a motion to include the community cycling awareness, I wanted to at least put it out there to see if anybody was interested in that as a goal. Christy, you've made some great comments on that, so we'll skip it then. Can I ask, is there any public comment regarding what we've talked about here as our near-term goals as a committee?
No additional comments. Peter.
Yeah. Okay, so let me reread them to the committee and then ask for a vote on these. We have 4 near-term objectives, 6-month objectives. In committee efforts and communications, 2, engage town and external agencies and the public in accomplishment of our committee's charge. 3, conduct an analysis of alternatives for a bikeway route through Wellfleet toward Truro. And 4, actively support the select board in teaming with state agencies, the Cape Cod Commission and the National Seashore regarding bikeway issues. So I move that we adopt those as our 6-month goals. Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Great. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, great. 5-0, thank you. Next on the agenda, the bikeway route through Wellfleet to Truro. So the first item on the agenda on the bikeway route is discussion of the methodology. And let me pull up one document if I may.
I'm stopping the agenda share so you can do that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Christy, I may ask you to walk me through how to
Sure.
share a document. Let me pull it up first
Okay.
on my screen.
I do have the documents all handy. Let's.
Oh, great.
If you want me to share it, was it the let's see here, the game plan
Yes, please.
or the draw? Okay, I can do that. How's that? Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, let me expand that out. Yes, can everybody see that? Okay. I show this at the beginning of topic number 5 on our agenda, the bikeway route, as a notional chart that shows how our process is working, gives a bird's eye view of what we're doing. in order to do an analysis of alternatives and to provide a recommendation to the select board, we have some parallel tasks. One is to identify alternatives to consider and analysis methodology. Those two activities are firewalled from each other to maintain the integrity of what we're doing. The first topic on the agenda here for under bikeway routes is the methodology, and Lance Miller has been our person to lead that development. So Lance, with that said, can I turn this over to you and you can give us some comments on the status of the methodology?
Sure. Thank goodness for the 2 weeks in between, you know, there was nothing to do over the holidays, you know, nothing going on. So I was able to get some more depth. The methodology that we're using is a methodology that is generally used in a variety of communities for evaluating alternatives. We're going to use it for evaluating bike alternatives, but I want to say that if you dusted off this and took out some of the things, it's generic. It's the one that's the best engineering practice kind of methodology. It's complicated. So what you do is, let me just walk at a high level and then tell you what we've done. You have, we have as a vision, say, the idea of promoting the Cape Cod bike path usage. So that's in general, that's common among all the agencies who talk about it. You first derive what are the goals that are subsumed under that vision. And you look for guidance to all kinds of inputs, as is noted here, the reference documents of all the major agencies, and public inputs, town inputs, anybody else. You read a lot about what's going on. And you try to get a sense of the goals that for this Cape Cod Trail, and in particular, this extension from Eastham to Truro, what are the set of goals that would really represent that vision? You know, it's like it's in there. Everything that people would be interested in is going to be expressed by this set of goals. And I think we've come a long way in identifying 4 goals that are consistent with all the inputs that we have, and really represent and can be utilized. They're well expressed. They're nothing different than anything. We time and again we are confronted with how good the work is that's been done in the primary agencies that we refer to, MassDOT, CDR, and CCC. Once you have the goals, you say, okay, maybe all the goals are equally important. Maybe not, but you have to consider that. And so you rank order the goals. And I have not found worldwide or Massachusetts or Cape Cod any difference than the fact that safety is number 1. So somehow that's going to be your most important goal. Similarly, you can rank order some of these goals, and you look at them and you say, all right, now I have them roughly in order. Some are closer to each other than others. Now I'm going to take 100 percentage points and I'm going to divide them up among those 4 goals or 5 goals, or what we have. And you do that. And the reason you do that is because you really want to have a verifiable procedure, a computational procedure that goes all the way from your vision to your goals, and then you break up the goals into the various facets that make up the goal. And then you say, how would I measure this idea of promoting connectivity or whatever it is? And you think of the criteria that would explicitly measure that. And those are the things that you're going to apply to the various alternative trails. And the way that you come up with a number is you take the percentage points that you've divided among the goals, and then you make sure they're distributed numerically and computationally correctly, all the way down to your criteria. So some criteria will have a certain weight of 1 or 2%, and some will have higher percentage. So you take your goals, you assign weights to the goals, a percentage point to the goals, and then when you consider the goals, you say, have I covered everything? Is there a glaring hole? For example, if you've left out user experience, you haven't done your job. So you run it against everything you can to make sure that in the goals, you've got everything that are really important for the Cape Cod Bike Trail extension. Now, you take one goal and you put the others aside. And you take that goal and say, I want to understand what are the facets of this goal. Safety. What are the facets of being safe, of actually being safe, as opposed to, say, feeling safe, which is the MassDOT, for example, distinguishes. That's comfort versus actual exposure to danger. You look at the goal and you break it up into facets, which we call objectives. And you say, okay, I think this goal has really three facets, 3 objectives associated with it. And that pretty well covers that goal. You make sure when you state those objectives that they don't overlap, that they're, sometimes you find as you look at these things, a goal has been restated and so that they're not, or an objective has been restated. So you make sure that they're differentiated. And so if you have 3 objectives for a particular goal that you started with, you say that goal, let's see here, that's safety, that was 40 points. And I have 3 facets. So somehow I have to distribute that 40 points among the 3 facets. And you rank order the objectives, and they may be equal. And in which case it's 40 divided by 3 points. If you say, no, this one here has been weighted and is more important than the others by all these agencies, and it makes sense to us for Wellfleet, then you assign the points proportional to that. So you get points assigned now to the objectives. And then what you do is you say, okay, now these are very specific objectives. Avoid exposure to, direct exposure to high velocity, high volume highways or something. That's a MassDOT objective. And you say, how would you measure that? What criteria would you use to do that? And you want to get at least 2 criteria for every objective. Otherwise, there's no difference between the objective and the criteria. So you say, what are the criteria? How could I actually measure it? And what you have in mind is that a normal human being could take that data, that criterion, and go out and look at a trail and make a reliable decision about that. And it would be reliable in the sense that if he did it once a week, his answers would be the same for that same part of the trail or whatever. So the criteria have to be expressed in a way that a normal person can use them and apply them. You allot the points down to the criteria. Now you've done that for that goal, and you go through in the second goal and you do the same thing in the third goal. And however many you go, you work down through objectives, which are the facets of the goal, and then how you're going to actually measure them. And we're adopting a particular procedure for the criteria. The criteria are going to have 5 to 7 answers, and from a low to high. And it might be how many scenic points of interest that have been pulled out and pointed out as good are on this trail. And the answers could be 0, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 8 or more. And you go and you count and you see, how would I do this? And you have a list of these and you would count on that. So every criterion is going to be expressed as a set of, we prefer 5 because it's used, 7 or more alternatives gets unwieldy. So we're thinking of 5, and that's commonly used. And they go from low to high, and there's a middle point. And what you do, and then they're counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for the criterion that say has a weight of 3, if it gets an answer of a rating of, if the trail gets a rating of 5, you would multiply 3 times 5 and you get 15. And that's that contribution of that criteria to evaluating this goal, this particular trail. Now you can imagine with 4 or 5 goals, and each one has 3 or 4 objectives, and each one has 2 to 5 criteria. You're going to have a whole bunch of these criteria out there, and multiplications. So we're going to develop spreadsheets that will take people go out and rate the trails and they come back with the data on all these criteria. We enter that in an Excel spreadsheet, and bang, it comes up with the score for that route based on everything we've done. So we implement in the Excel spreadsheet all of our logic, all of our thinking, and then we eliminate the possibility of human error by doing that. In this committee, there's plenty of savvy about Excel programming and other types of programming and the math needed to do this. So we will then have a methodology that can be applied to any path anywhere, but in particular, it can be applied to the alternatives that are going up. I myself have no knowledge of these. Obviously, I'm not. I mean, I drive around Wellfleet, so I can see things, but I don't know what's being picked. So, as we work through the goals and objectives and come down to the criteria, I don't know. There's no bias in me. Possibly, I'm only trying to ensure that the criteria that are selected reflect the objectives, and the objectives reflect the goals, and that everybody has agreed on these goals and has agreed on the objectives and has seen the criteria. We need to test this before we put it out for prime time. I would think one of the ways we want to do this is to say, okay, let's take the Wellfleet Library and Marconi Beach, and let's think of different routes that we could get, bike routes from those, and let's try applying this methodology to those east-west things. And we're unlikely to trip over any of the north-south thing paths that are going to be produced. And we'll discuss and we'll discuss as a committee the difficulties we have with these particular criteria. And you know what? I don't think that objective that we have for this goal is correctly expressed. I think we should word it this way. And so that might imply different criteria. So in doing this, we will, as part of our methodology, we will validate our criteria and backwards up through the partitioning of the goals into objectives. The next part of the methodology is that it's applied. And there you get, the committee will apply the criteria to all the bike path alternatives. And we have such a range of experience, user experience. For example, I'm not much of a biker, but I'm a real hiker, and I would want to hike the whole trail, and so I bring that experience. Others of us are really experienced bikers, and we bring that. Others are more interested in the scenic aspects, and we'll look at it from that and have more practical. All of the committee will look at the trails, take the ready for prime time criteria and validate them, and they'll apply them to the path alternatives. We'll come up with scores, put them in the spreadsheets, and we'll come out with a score for each path, and we'll rank order them. I saw a hand, Christy. Was that just an involuntary spasm, or?
Yeah, I was just pondering.
We look at them, and now comes a really important part. We don't just say, okay, here's number one, and here's number two, and those are the ones we're going to go. We're going to look very carefully at how they're distributed, and whether there's any way we can make sense from other criteria. Does that make sense? Does something that is so devoid of scenic beauty come out high? Or is the number one? It wouldn't make sense. We're going to look very carefully at all these paths to see whether we've somehow made a mistake. I'm sure we won't have, but we should do that. The next thing we'll do is we'll look at where things are close. A very clear alternative is one in which there's one path that's heads and shoulders above all the others. And, you know, the next one is 30 points down, or, you know, and they're all bunched down there. So there isn't much you can do that. The problematic is when you get three that are tightly clustered at the top. You want to go in and look at that. And you want to say, let's perform a sensitivity analysis to see whether there's some bias introduced by the weightings that we have chosen that would account for this cluster. What happens if we take the best way to avoid bias or to have no statistical bias is to equally weight everything all the way down. So we'll go back, change the formula such that all of the goals are weighted equally, all of the objectives are weighted equally, all of the criteria are weighted equally, and we'll then apply the ratings to those paths, and we'll see whether the groupings change. If the groupings change remarkably, then they are sensitive to the weightings that we have done. And we will go and then examine what the nature of that will be. If the rankings are not responsive to that type of sensitivity analysis, then we can have great confidence that they're not due to any artifact of our weight. And in the case, if there were three, we would, my recommendation is, and this is done typically, is that we go back and repeat the rating, because three being so tightly clustered that the margin of error is such that you can't really discriminate them. Like political candidates, there's three there, and the margin of error is such that you can't say that anyone is the winner. We go back and then we rate. If it's only two that are very close, I think what we do is propose, we go to the select board and we propose that we have a subsequent evaluation that is based upon the characteristics of differences between these two paths. We create additional ratings, criteria that would discriminate further among them, and then we apply those and get the answers and come up with the additional thing and see whether those two paths can be separated. Again, the criteria have to be developed so that they're not partial to one or the other. That's why our process is going to be so open and available, and we're going to have so much. So I'm sorry to have taken so long to do this. It is complicated, but it's well within our power to do. And if we do it this way, everything is transparent. We can put it out and say, here's the spreadsheet. Here's all of our logic. Please tell us. We're ready for input. Tell us what, if you have any concerns about it. And so in this 2-week, nothing happening over these last 2 weeks, we were able to move to this point where we're ready to get the fingerprints of other really important stakeholders. Stop SER in particular, the commission. We would invite, that list can go further. We want, in fact, to find, and we have, contacts in each of these areas that we can go to and say, we would like to have you respond to this. We want to give them time and take their input and then evaluate it and then modify as appropriate our methodology. I think that covers it. Over to you.
I think that's a
Lance, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, that was great, Lance.
Yeah, that's great.
It's I have to say something. It's great. Here's a guy moved. He was living in a different world for 6 years, and he's plunked down in this beautiful
What's that?
work with such great people. I'm very grateful.
So I don't know if the connection issue is on my end or if everyone is experiencing it.
Yeah,
I'm also.
yeah, me too.
Okay. Is there any point that Lance was making that somebody wanted to get clarification on or that they didn't hear?
I think, you're able to get the gist of it, but it was a little frustrating at times. It would go in and out. But we certainly got the basics of what you were explaining, so it was great.
Lance, can I summarize what I heard you say? I mean, you described the system in terms of how we do goals, objectives, as the measures for those objectives, and how the scores are weighted based on the priority of the goal, and then how those weights are then distributed or divided amongst the objectives to the criteria. I was making some notes as you were talking. I mean, 4 things that I really that I think are strengths of the approach that you're developing. I mean, the checks that you talk about doing to go back and review results in real time to look for things like criteria overlap ahead of time, but then during the scoring to look for scoring clustering. You want to make sure that we're actually getting meaningful results, and that we haven't unintentionally skewed anything in the criteria in a particular direction, so that we get clusters of answers. And then also the idea of getting input from the externals, because I know there's been a lot of review of external documents, the guidance from guidance documents here within Massachusetts from Mass DOT and from DCR. And then, of course, federal level, and then looking at how analyses like this have been conducted in different regions and different municipalities around the country, and then even looking at what standards have been applied overseas. Because, you know, if Europe is considered to be a model of how bike routes are implemented, then, you know, we certainly want to be looking there as well. And I think we have in several cases, several of the references that you looked at are from Europe. So thank you for doing that. Where would you say it sounds as though the next step in developing the methodology is really to continue working on the math has been developed, and at this point it's to continue defining what the goals and the objectives and criteria are. Is that the way you see it?
I think we want to be comfortable with the vision, and I think we want to put out the goals, and certainly this committee needs to agree on goals and then to go through the prioritization. What's most important, and
so right now we have a draft document Lance is working on. Lance, I know this draft is continuing to develop until it's finalized, but the intent is that once the draft reaches maturity, to then take that and present it to the select board prior to us conducting the analysis. Okay, great. I see you've got Lance, you want to go through this the sheet that you've shared this, right?
yes, if we could go down to the spreadsheet.
Oh, yes, let me I think that's a separate document. I have it though. Hang on. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I can't see it for a second here. Aha. Okay. I will be able to.
So Lance is, just so for people who are viewing, Lance has put together a data collection sheet on each of the alternatives, not filled in, of course, but just a blank data sheet that's got a page of instructions and description, followed by the spreadsheet itself. And I think Christy is pulling the spreadsheet up.
Yes. Is this what you were hoping for, Lance?
Yeah, this is good. The idea is the alternatives are going to be developed.
Can it be?
And pardon? Did you say something, Pete? I can't. Are you talking, Pete? I can't hear you.
I'm not talking.
Okay. I thought it might be useful
Nope.
for the people that are actually developing alternatives to have some way of describing them. And so I thought I would try to be helpful and give you a data sheet that could be used to do this. And I was thinking that, of course, the public and a lot of people are going to be interested in knowing about these alternatives and what are the things that they would be particularly interested in. And I tried to capture it here. And I'm just suggesting it. Maybe it'll be useful, maybe it won't. But here's the idea, is that you have up at the upper left, you have the path number. There's going to be 1 to, I don't know, 7 or something. And you've given a name to it, some kind of name. So it's, you know, it's it's the Route 6, it's the Old Kings Highway, it's the Fire Road, it's the, whatever is a distinguishing feature about that path, you give it a name, so it characterizes it. The next thing is you characterize how long it is. And that's really important because directness is always on people's mind about bike paths. That's something they always want to know. Well, how long does it take? You know, it's twice as long as the other. They want to, this is something, it's not evaluation, it's features that are important. And the next thing is the start location. Obviously, you want to know where things start and stop. It's possible that you will consider a path that doesn't start at the campgrounds, but who knows? And where does it finish? Where does it end up in True? On Route 6, on some other road? Okay. Now, I thought it would be useful to, because MassDOT in particular and DCR as well as CCC emphasize how the riders are connected to motorways. I thought we would pull out some of those. We only have one high velocity, high volume roadway here, unlike say Chicago or something where there's multiples, and that's Route 6. But first is count for each path the number of times it intersects a motorway, crosses a road on which there'll be cars at least on there. Count how far it goes on Route 6. Route 6 is obviously the big highway. How many miles is it parallel or road sharing on minor roads? Those three are used time and again as indicators or characterizers, not necessarily evaluated, but they give you an idea. Well, okay, this doesn't seem to cross any motorways. And one finally is since connectivity is promoted in every study of bikeways that I've seen, is how connected is it? And I think we have to think about what this means, but it means, well, this path, it's bush cutting all the way through and it doesn't connect with anything, hardly anything. So there'd be zero there. If it's a Route 6 path, it connects with everything. So somewhere in between, you could count that. So those are the overall characteristics. Is this sufficient? Is it too much? Am I missing something? I don't know. I put it out to the committee. Maybe this is a useful way. And the right part of the thing is saying, how many segments are there to a path? And a segment is defined as something that has a particular type of path, and then it changes. It goes on a road, and then it goes on a fire trail. At that point, it changes to be another segment. And as long as it's on that fire trail, that's the same segment. But then it goes to the utility right-of-way. That's a new segment. So I think this, something that has many different segments across thing is different from a path that has one, and it's good to know that. It's good to see that. Maybe this is too much, I don't know, but it's, so I say for each segment, how long is it? What type of path it is? Is it a major highway, another type of roadway, Old Kings Highway? Is it a utility right-of-way? Is it a fire road? Is it private? Or is it a trail? We have to, you identify those. You identify the end. I didn't put that in there because that's very specific. You have to really put the coordinates of where it changes. And who's the owner? I'm saying it for there. And that's important both for permitting and then also abutting and other issues. And then you also say on this segment, how many direct branches are there to important places? Okay. Again, this is tended to be useful and helpful. It's a neutral way of describing the paths, doesn't bias, it gives particular information. So that's,
It's very
Lance, can I
cool.
ask you
I find.
a question?
Sure.
Hey, is this, it looks like the format that I'm viewing here might run off the page. Is this showing the complete
yes, it's,
data sheet, or is there a, okay. So the last column is this one that goes in your examples with the 11324.
yes, that's the last column.
That's the last column. Okay, thank you.
I didn't mention that.
So I
but
know in the text page,
Let me just say a word about
go
that.
ahead.
As you look at each segment, just have in your mind how much work is there in developing this? I mean, it crosses water, it goes up steep hills, and it's very narrow. So just roughly, you might say it's really hard. This one is right along a motorway, so it's really easy. So just characterize roughly, that's what that's about. So people can have an idea roughly of it. It's not any kind of a criteria, it's your impression. Sorry.
Thanks.
Kind of a cost
The,
criteria. though.
I know you've got there's a page ahead of the spreadsheet. What's
Ned
that?
said something I missed.
Yeah, I was just saying that makes it kind of a cost criteria, really, the ease of development, that unfortunately is going to weigh in there too.
Yeah, I absolutely. It also might obstruct, it might go by, the path might actually be the entrance to some private owner's property. And you're going to obstruct them if you go by that. So that would rate it. There's a lot of factors that would go into that. I agree.
So Lance, the shared screen, I can't tell looking at it because it's kind of screen. Are you, does the data sheet include any sort of cost information or projections?
I felt that's really detailed. It's a very complicated thing to do. I thought that the impression as captured by the last column might be sufficient.
I kind of agree there. I think that's something we can't delve into at this point. We rate all our criteria and then, we'll get the feedback as to what the cost is. I mean, that's pretty hard to determine, what it's actually going to be.
I will say this, that everybody, I mean, every one of our state agencies that we refer to has to look at the practicality of this trail that's being considered. And one aspect of the practicality is cost. So if we have a goal
Right.
that practicality, say, or something like that, we know that one of the criteria is going to be estimated costs in some way. It has to be in order to, practicality depends upon cost. It also depends upon permitting, how long it would take to get permitting and so on. There's other aspects of practicality. But I would suggest that those actual cost estimates and stuff should await our criteria flowing out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. It strikes me, so I think this is a great sheet to collect. It's for data collection. And we can use it to arrive at some of the other information that we need to include in the analysis.
Yes. And also, if you want to have a handout
Yeah.
to people to say,
And
you know, here's what we're looking at. This is neutral. I mean,
I kind of think it isn't really up to us to even really, I mean, we have to consider the cost, but I don't think we want to really develop any criteria on it. And we will get that from the state agencies for sure later. They might right away say, oh, this is crazy, we can't do this. But we can give them what we think is the best route in every other way. We're trying to keep costs in mind, but I don't see how we have any way of knowing what the cost is going to be. And, you know, I don't feel like that's in our charge to, you know, we want to, again, keep it in mind, keep trying to be as practical as possible. But, you know, I don't think we want to get into analyzing the costs of it that much.
I think everything's within a scope. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, developing a bridge from Wellfleet to Truro like the whole way. So, I mean, everything we're discussing sort of in line with what other towns have done or what's already partially here.
Yeah, when you think about how much money they spent down in Yarmouth where they did build
Um,
bridges, and, you know, it was huge amounts of money, a lot more money than a hell of a lot more than what the DOT with their original plan there was, you know, allocating. So.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Ned.
do you know the 10-to-1 rule about over and under? If you
No.
go over, if you have to go over something, it's going to cost 10 times as much as if you went under it.
Yeah,
So that's almost directly out of one of the design guides of MassDOT. So absolutely, I think what we can do, we can't do the cost. I've just lost my screen, so.
we can hear you though.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can say, in terms of practicality, let's look at things that we know are costly. So if a path has to have bridges built over water, we can count that. We know that there's a cost. We don't make the assessment of the cost, but we say this requires 3 fordings or 3 bridges to be built or costed. And we can put those costly items. We can say, here are the set of costly items for something, widening, you know, what they are. And we say, does this path have 0 of them or more than 15? And those are going to be directly correlated highly with cost, but we won't get into the cost. So I think we can finesse, Ned, what you're concerned about.
Right.
And Rebecca.
And we do have some insights into how the state would budget or would calculate, do a final calculation. Some of the references that we've looked at here in the state include some of the figures that they use: cost per foot of particular building materials, things like that. So, you know, we know what some of the factors are that the state includes in its cost estimation, and we will not. You're right. We won't be in a position to determine an accurate cost estimate. But I think we can put these in the right range. You know, as somebody said, if we're building a suspension bridge to a Truro, it will. You know, we can flag that as. I mean, that's going to be a cost discriminator. Okay. Thank you for putting this together. This is, I don't know that we have any committee action on this right now, except that we're considering this as a data collection tool as we go through the alternatives. There is a firewall between the development of the methodology and the identification of the alternatives. This is a data need for the methodology. And so Lance is presenting this so that as we pull together, as others pull together the list of alternatives, be a data collection tool as we consider those alternatives. Great. Now, Lance, was there anything else, or I'll move it into goals?
Nothing else. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that I can share a document. Perhaps it would be best to, let me see if I can get a document up. Let's see. I can't see anyone right now. I'm not sure why. Let me try to pull this up. Here we go.
If you have your document pulled up and you hover towards the bottom of your screen, the Zoom bar should come up.
Okay.
And do you see the green share screen option?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not getting the that screen that you're referring to.
Or
Sometimes
click
you hit escape, stuff shows up.
yeah. Or if you click on the little blue camera, the Zoom camera on the bottom bar of your computer.
Yeah.
And then that should return the bottom bar that has the chat and the participants and everything. Are you able to get that?
No.
Are you still the host? Because it looks like Gary is the host. Maybe that's why.
Well, but I'm able to share.
Yeah, we should be. I should be able to share. I'll tell you what. In the interest of time, let me read this, and we can, if we're able to share it. I think part of the problem is because I've gone in and out of Zoom a few times, and that has created a problem.
I'll put our agenda back up. You can always email me if you want me to pop it up.
Let's see. Okay, now I have the screen back. Okay, I now have my screen back up. So can you, if you take the agenda off, I'll, brother, this is not. Here we go. Okay.
Awesome.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so in looking at goals, two of us individually, well, all of us had access to a number of references to consider. And we've compared notes. Lance took an independent review. I did too. Lance distilled what he found into 4 potential, and I've listed those here. And then underneath, I've listed the various inputs that I individually, and separate from Lance, that I pulled out of about 17 different reference documents and a number of public input sources. I'll talk about what input sources I used down below here. I looked at videos from meetings that were held in June of 2019 with DCR, March 10th of 2020 with DCR and DOT, in which there were, in each case, about an hour and a half of public comment. I watched each of those videos and pulled out any statements, any reference I heard to what a path should include, because I was looking not for complaints or anything specific, but rather for people's ideas on what goals and objectives a bike trail should have. So I got those as sources of public input. A number of ideas came out of the reference documents, and that includes both guidance documents and completed studies that have been done around the state, around the country, and overseas. And then the third input, let's see, the external references. And the third one was the committee. And we had this as a topic at the last two meetings to get inputs from the committee members. And you recall at the last meeting, there were several that were rattled off as we talked about it. Ned and Rebecca were kind of leading that. I've listed all of those because I pulled those out of the, I was taking notes during our meeting and then looked at the minutes as well. So I went through all of those and compared them with the 4 that Lance had independently come up with, and to see if there was a traceability between all those inputs to his goals. I found there was, but I'd like to share it with you. But first, let me talk about what the 4 goals are here. These are draft. And these come from, again, they're traceable to all these various references and sources. So the first is safety. Second, practicality of the path. Third, user experience. That's not experience level, but rather what is the quality of the user experience on the trail. And then fourth, connectivity. In addition to local interest in connectivity, we found that it was an important ingredient in assessing bike trail options around of how the quality of a bike route. So these sentences, the statements that are underneath each of these 4 goals, these are descriptive. They're not meant, they're meant to imply the sorts of objectives that might be covered by each goal. So as we develop a list of objectives under safety, they may include these various factors that are listed in these paragraphs. Exposure to physical danger, stress, noise, pollution of high volume, high velocity traffic, etc. Under practicality, there will be objectives that address factors like reasonable cost. Again, we're not going to budget for these things, but we can scale, we can look at the order of magnitude of the cost. Impact on landowners or on cultural or environmental areas. User experience. We'll develop objectives related to providing an enjoyable and convenient experience for all of the diverse intended users. So that includes not just the quality of the experience, but also accessibility for people of different abilities. Connectivity with social and cultural centers, food and rest areas. We'll see these delineated as objectives under the goals. So these are 4 draft goals. As I scroll down, is it scrolling on your screen as well?
Yes.
Okay. So took a look at each of these inputs. First, the public inputs. Many inputs made by the public. And again, this goes to meeting comments. Also written comments to the select board, written inputs. And the third source, excuse me, inputs to DCR during the public comments period on their proposed project. So it really public comments distilled down to about 7 main items. Safety for all modes of transportation, that includes bikes and cars or motor vehicles. Low stress for all modes of transportation. Again, motor traffic, as well as cyclists and pedestrians. Connectivity, accessibility for all ages and ability. A path should enhance Wellfleet's quality of life. It should preserve Wellfleet's character and provide scenic and enjoyable cycling and walking. So external references, extracting the various factors from them, came up with a longer list, total of 19. Safety, comfort and attractiveness of the route, minimizing adverse environmental impacts, local support. Local support's an interesting one. That actually is emphasized in our state's planning guides, both for DOT and DCR. Accessibility, connectivity, promoting cycling, being consistent with the surrounding area's character, private property impacts, constructability, costs, mobility increase and improved bicycle access to community destinations, emergency access and safety availability, right-of-way availability, adjacent property issues, permitting requirements, consistency with local plans, maintenance and operation requirements, and overall design of the network should be simple and provide easy orientation for cyclists. Last group, there were 17 items in total. The first, to promote cycling in general, second, promote cycling as a means of transportation in Wellfleet. Third, to create an enjoyable recreational cycling experience. To be cost effective, to minimize or mitigate private property impacts, minimize environmental impacts, minimize impacts on the national seashore, promote safety, establish connectivity with Wellfleet, honor Wellfleet's history and character, connect to other trails, promote enjoyable cycling for all ages and ability, provide separation from motor vehicle traffic, avoid dangerous intersections, minimize noise levels, provide optimal accessibility, and to provide facilities and rest stations for route users. So those were the inputs that came in our committee discussion. I went through and found that all of these were traceable to these 4 goals, which Lance had drafted. And as you read through these, wonder if there's any discussion.
Well, I just think it looks,
Thorough to me.
yeah. It's very cool to see that they can all connect to the 4 goals, and just amazing how efficient this is.
So, yeah, going through the public inputs, I'll tell you the traceability I saw. In the public inputs, the first 2 trace to the first goal, safety. Number 3, connectivity, that traces to number 4, obviously connectivity. The 4th point traces to user experience, number 3. The 6th traces to number 2, practicality, and the 7th goes to number 3, which is user experience. External references, the first one, obviously safety. The next one is traces to user experience. The next one to practicality. Number 3 and number 4 both trace to practicality. Number 5 traces to user experience. Number 6 to connectivity. Number 7, promoting cycling. that's all encompassing. In fact, we may want to consider something along those lines as a vision statement from which the goals derive, rather than trying to attach that to one particular goal. And again, this is a bit of a logic exercise just to ensure that the goals that we've pulled from outside sources are reflected in the goals that we use in our analysis. The eighth one here, consistent with surrounding areas character, traces to number 2. And that's practicality. Again, it's some of these being consistent with the surrounding areas character. That is partly a matter of practicality to ensure that the path is achievable and with minimum impact on landowners or cultural or environmental areas. So you can see what we used as a definition of practicality includes a lot of things besides simply constructability. So points 8, 9, and 10, I'll do trace to that practicality, and 11. Number 12 traces to 4 above, connectivity. The next 2, 13 and 14, both trace to practicality.
Can you move your sheet up?
Yes, sorry.
Thanks.
So 15, 16, 17, and 18 all trace to practicality. And 19 traces to goal number 3, to user experience. And then if we look at the inputs that came through the committee, number 1, again, goes to something of a vision statement. 2 and 3 trace to the user experience goal. 4, 5, 6, and 7 trace to practicality. 8, safety, goal number 1. And then the number 9 in connectivity, obviously. 10 traces to practicality, goal number 2. 11 to connectivity. 12 traces to goal number 3, which is user experience. 13 trace, and 14 and 15 all trace to goal number 1, which is safety related. And then goals 16 or items 16 and 17 here both trace to goal number 3, user experience. So I'd be happy to send out that traceability, but it was basically just an exercise of going through and looking for what fits where. And bottom line is that all of the inputs that we were able to collect, that I was able to collect from reviewing citizen inputs, committee input, these 4 goals. So I recommend them. If anybody feels that we need to have other goals, then let's talk about it. Any thoughts?
I think this covers everything.
I agree. Yeah.
I want to just comment the differences in Peter's approach and mine. I was really focusing on the agencies that are directly responsible for Massachusetts and Cape Cod and what they thought about things. I sometimes would go into their design documents, but I was really taking an agency's point of view. And then I don't know, there are 15, 20 studies of people, various cities, Cupertino, where are we going to put our bike path? What did they think about? And I was really trying to get in the head. So it's really a quite different approach than Pete took. Pete did the enormously difficult job of going through all of these inputs to the town and these sources. I did not. I was oriented, for better or worse, with what I had and what I thought was most important to make sure that we were consistent with. What's remarkable is that the mapping is as good as it is. I think that has to give us confidence that maybe we don't have the words right yet, but it's pretty good. I'm impressed with that traceability.
Me too.
Hey, Peter, just one
Yeah.
comment. This is a great list, and I think it encompasses, everything. Thank you for doing all that research and watching all those videos from the DCR meetings, as painful as those must have been to watch at times. But I think just my only comment would be, as I said, a really solid list. As Lance and the team goes through your methodology, maybe what you do is come up with some ideas for possibly adding to the goals that you have based on this methodology, if that makes sense, and use this document as a preliminary and adjust it accordingly as you go through the process. That's my comment.
Good comment.
Thank you, Tom. Let's see, do we have anybody else who is on the call at this point who would like to make any comments? Great input.
I think we
What I would suggest is that we consider this to be our draft set of goals, not a final set, and then we continue to collect inputs. There are other agencies who we're going to want to contact to do that. And so let me first ask, given that this is something that's still a work in progress, I would make a motion that we adopt these four goals as our draft goals for the purpose of this analysis.
I second that.
So is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. In following up on this draft, I mentioned contacting other agencies. In particular, I would want to have inputs from the Cape Cod Commission, from the Truro, in particular their Bike and Walkways Committee, and then also the state agencies, DCR and DOT, and then the Cape Cod National Seashore. And also, of course, public input. And then within the town, looking at both a combination of the town government departments and also some of our other committees and boards. Within the town, I would start with the town administrator, but want to include the police. And then on the board side, boards and committees, I would say the planning board, the conservation committee, and the historical commission. So
Department of Public
are
Works.
there thoughts on those?
Yeah.
Yeah, DPW.
Mhm.
In fact, I've had some discussion with Mark Vincent, who's the DPW director, and he has offered to serve as our direct point of contact with DPW. Asked us to also keep in touch with Jill McLaughlin regarding, who's at Stantec Corporation, regarding any issues pertaining to the Route 6 Main Street intersection. So at his suggestion, we'll do that. We'll keep Jill in the loop on anything relating to that intersection project. and we'll use Mark as our point of contact to DPW. But so in order to move ahead on this, and in keeping with that that game plan, could we put that back up, Christy?
Sure.
That game plan document, thank you.
Oop, you have to end your screen share and then I'll be able to get in there.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that.
Let's see. So if you hover, or maybe I can, no, there you go, you got it. All right. How's that for everybody?
Okay, so great. We're looking at the bottom left part of that slide. As we're developing the methodology, prior to going to the select board with a draft for their consideration, you're getting inputs from a number of different sources. And I mentioned some in particular. If I could make them, I'd like to see if there's any other discussion, any other inputs on either town boards, committees, and offices. Are there any others besides the one I mentioned that we should consider? The list that I had was town administrator, police, fire and rescue, DPW. Let me add to that. Well, should we be contacting, perhaps we include the school with that as well, since
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, and the town recreation department and the historical society. I don't know how much the historical commission overlaps with the historical society, but they have so much knowledge.
That's great. Thank you. The historical commission came to mind because they're a town government office, but certainly including other groups in Wellfleet is, even if they're private groups like the historical society, is a great idea, because we definitely want public input on this. Okay.
And
And
just
then-
a last one. I just can imagine the library will want connectivity as well. But
Thank you.
Just to throw out, what about fire and police?
We can, if we establish a list at this meeting,
oh.
so
we
yeah, I
lost
mentioned them
you.
right after town administrator. Oh, okay. Well, let me go through it. Town administrator, police, fire and rescue.
Okay.
Did I break up again?
Yes.
And now,
Hard when this happens.
So, yeah. So I would move that we take a couple of votes here. One is on who we would include on an initial list of contacts within the town. And that initial list would include the town administrator, police, fire and rescue, DPW, recreation, the school, the planning board, conservation commission, the historical commission, the library, and the Historical Society.
Mhm.
As a
I second that.
an initial list. Well, and let me finish it. Pending any recommendations by the town administrator. I mean, in addition to consider inputs from the town administrator,
Mhm.
because I can imagine her wanting to, perhaps she will have somebody else who she thinks will help improve the list.
Yeah, the more people we
So-
can have involved, the more people that'll be interested in everything. So why not?
Yeah.
Agreed.
So that's the motion. It's been seconded by Christie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then a second list, that's the list within the town. The second list is the external contacts. And I've mentioned 5. The town of Truro, that's their Bike and Walkways Committee. Cape Cod Commission, DCR, DOT, and the Cape Cod National Seashore. Again, these contacts are not, we're not representing the town in talking with them. That is something that's in the purview of the select board. What we're doing is taking inputs into the methodology that we're developing. Using them for technical inputs. So I would move that we include those 5 external agencies as we seek those inputs for our methodology. Does anybody second?
Second.
I second.
Okay.
Oh,
Rebecca, are you back? I think we lost Rebecca.
we could. Let's see.
I just want to
Yeah.
see if we could get Rebecca back in. If we're going to have a vote. Well, we have a quorum, so in the interest of time, all in favor of that list, that motion?
I.
Aye.
Okay, so that's 4 votes and Rebecca is unavailable.
Yeah, we lost her altogether for a minute here. Oh, there she's back. Okay.
Hi, Rebecca.
Sorry, the connection keeps cutting out.
Yeah, we're just taking a vote on. Did you hear the motion?
I did not. Sorry.
Okay. I'll try to repeat it. Christy, correct me if I get it wrong, but essentially, were you here for the vote on the going to the town organizations,
Yes.
Rebecca? Okay.
Yes.
Then next we considered a list of external agencies who we would similarly contact: Cape Cod Commission, DCR, DOT, Cape Cod National Seashore, and the Truro Bike and Walkways Committee. Again, to get their input into our analysis methodology, their technical inputs. And so I made the motion. I believe Christy seconded it, and we were taking a vote. And so let's.
Add me, yes.
Okay, so then it's unanimous. That was a 5-0. Okay, thank you.
And I'm really sorry, but I hear somebody just pulled up, so I am going to just check who's at the door. Sorry.
Okay. The just as a reminder, as we're looking at the Bikeway, we mentioned connectivity as a goal. one thing to keep in mind is that we are not proposing an end-all bike trail, a one and done. What we're really talking about is what I've seen referred to in many of the references and studies around the country as a stem trail, a primary artery, if you will, for a bike trail, for a bike network. And so connectivity is going to be important as we look at that. I just thought that worth mentioning because it will help shape the discussion as we're some of these outside agencies and also some of the people in the town about options that are available for biking in Wellfleet. That we're not talking about removing bikes from any particular area so much as we are talking about creating a main artery for that will promote cycling in the best way possible. And that will have connectors and loops and that connectivity will be a key. Next on the agenda, and we'll try to speed this up, accessibility requirements, and this goes to ADA. Two of us took a look at it independently. That's me and Rebecca, and I know Rebecca's had to leave for just a moment. Here, just a moment. So let me talk about what I found on ADA requirements. It's not clear cut. There's a lot to consider. The original reason that this was being researched was to find out if the accessibility requirements are different for different, depending on who is funding the trail or who owns the trail, and if the requirements are consistent. So I looked at a number of different sources around the country, and I'd say it was about 12 different sources that I looked at. And here's what it comes down to. DOT and DCR both have sets of criteria. They derive from different sources at the federal level. DOT derives in particular from the Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, which has a set of guidelines where it tries to abide by ADA. And then I also looked at the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board guidance documents. And these are two that are referred to in the DoD guidance. DCR gets its inputs, it seems, from the Forest Service. The Forest Service has two documents, the Forest Service Trails Accessibility Guidelines and the Forest Service Outdoor Recreational Accessibility Guidelines. The first one is the one that's most relevant, it turns out, to our case, and that's the Service Trails Accessibility Guidelines. Some of this gets into terminology. It is interesting that the rail trail is called a trail. There are different types of trails. As you can imagine, and I looked at documentation around the country, you have hiking trails that are very rugged, you have multi-use paths, you have trails similar to what we have on the rail trail. Guidance around the various states depends in part on what kind of trail it is. In the case of Massachusetts, and to cut really to the chase here, DCR and DOT do have different sets of guidance. DOT is more highway oriented, more roadway oriented. And they have a set of guidelines that essentially boil down to, in something they call their design guide for shared pathways and greenways, that grade should not exceed 5% unless certain conditions are met. DCR has a different set of guidelines for trails, and they have different categories of trails. The category that the rail trail seems to fit is the category or classification 5 trail under DCR's guidelines. And they have a document called Trails Guidelines and Best Practices. And a category or classification 5 trail has 5% or less grade for up to 90% of its length. 8% grade is allowable up to 200 feet maximum length in any particular area. No more than 3% of the total length of the trail can be within 5% of the short pitch maximum grade, in other words, the 8%. The rail trail appears to fit the definition of a classification 5 trail. So found that interesting. I also went to a description of the rail trail online, and it is described as, and this is on DCR's website. I'm trying to pull up the wording here, and of course, in the paper here that I'm not seeing it right now, but essentially described it as a relatively flat trail with sections that are steep. So that's something to bear in mind as we're going forward, looking at Wellfleet alternatives. We have 2 different sets of criteria, one from DOT, one from DCR. So it would seem that whether the trail is, whichever state organization ends up being the primary in this, might determine which set of criteria we follow for accessibility or for grade requirements in particular. That's about it. It's found a lot of information. I'm just giving a brief summary. It was useful to see how accessibility requirements or guidelines have been applied around the country in different bikeways, shared use pathways, and walkways as well.
Yeah, that's great, Peter. Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely they have distinctly different accessibility criteria, the 2 agencies, based on the reading that I did.
Yeah, it's good to see that there's a little bit of leeway there.
That's true. And I can
Yeah.
imagine the location of the alternative might factor into who we have to adhere to, what guidelines.
Yeah.
Oh, Pete, you're frozen again. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Okay. And I, perhaps it was on my end, but I missed much of what you just said. So what, you were just making a comment on something?
Oh, I was just thinking that the location of the route alternative may heavily factor into which organization is the primary player that we're working with.
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, as DOT, their guidance suggests that what they're mostly looking at is bikeways that are adjacent to roadways. And on the one hand, they have a 5% grade as a goal, but they also make the point that if the existing road grade is steeper than 5%, then the bikeway grade or shared use pathway grade, I should be specific, can exceed 5% as well, as long as it follows the road grade and does not exceed the road grade. So, they make allowances for, circumstances like that. There are other cases where these guidelines are waivable in need to be that the standards need to be waived. We of course want to make the trails as accessible as possible. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for, and we've focused on grade requirements here, but there are a lot of different accessibility requirements, and we want to make sure they're followed. A lot of that will go into how a trail is designed, and that gets into construction. So which is independent of what we're doing here with their analysis. But I think in our analysis, we want to consider whether or not a trail can potentially meet the governing guidance, whichever direction the trail goes. If it's along a roadway, if it's following some pathway that's not on a roadway, if it's separated from a road. So more to follow later, but it was interesting to find the guidance that the two agencies provide. Identifying the route alternatives. So we've agreed to hold a meeting on the 15th of January in which we can focus a discussion on those alternatives. We want to make sure that we list as many as we can. And we've also talked about potentially holding a community forum to get more public input on those ideas. And so we'll pursue those. Let me ask, because at this point, is there anybody's input on ADA requirements or on the route alternatives before we move forward? Public input. Okay. An update on external engagements. I mentioned that I've established contact at DPW and with Stantec. With Truro, I've been keeping in contact with the chair of the Truro Bike and Walkways Committee. So prior to each of our meetings, I've notified her that we have the meeting, invited her to participate. Obviously, you know, that's only if she's available, and she has access to our meeting minutes, of course. So we've had good exchange by email, and I've offered to participate, that we can participate with them in a joint meeting, but we definitely want to get their inputs as an external agency. You would think it would be interesting to hold a joint meeting. Let me turn to some of the past people who've been on the committee longer than I, who have met with Truro. Ned, I know you were involved, and maybe was Rebecca. I don't know if Christy, if you were.
Yeah, Rebecca and Christy
met
were
with
there
Truro?
too, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, I believe Rebecca, Christy, and
Okay.
myself. And that's the only one in the 6 years or so that I've been on the committee that we've had a meeting with them. But I thought it was really productive. You know, they were very open to hearing what we're proposing, and you know, I think it's a good thing.
Okay, well, hopefully we can, does it following up with another joint meeting sound like a useful thing to do at this point? If we could do it in the next couple of weeks.
One other thing to add on that, actually that one meeting we had also had at least one representative from Provincetown as well. So, you know, if we're gonna do it, it might be kind of nice to get all three. Or for that matter, Eastham, we've never had any connection with Eastham, but.
I think Eastham doesn't anymore have a bike and walkway committee,
Yeah.
because we had tried to include them before, and we couldn't find any.
Yeah, they pretty much, they have the bike trail through Eastham, and I guess they're done, yeah.
They've done it. It's a
Yeah.
great.
You know, that's a great point.
Peter, I wanted to ask, back on the list, I'm just now thinking about Provincetown. Wouldn't it be
So,
to include Provincetown as well? When you talk to the other, you're going to talk to Truro.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, that meeting we had with Truro before, we had Provincetown, at least one representative from Provincetown as well. So it's definitely
Okay.
worthwhile. Yeah.
well, is in keeping with our charge then to include both Provincetown and Truro. I'd be happy to contact the Provincetown committee to see if they're interested in doing a meeting with us, or at least where we can talk to them about what we're doing, find out what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me take an action to talk to P-Town. And I'll report back on that at the next meeting. Okay. Any other route issues? Nope. Okay. Other bikeway and walkway issues in Wellfleet. We had projects of interest in neighboring towns. There were two that we learned about, one in Harwich and one in Barnstable. The one in Harwich is it's a sidewalk that they're doing along Route 28 in an area that where apparently there's a need. As a sidewalk project, we thought it sounded interesting to see what lessons they're learning. They are in the process of working with the Cape Cod Commission to get this project finalized so it can be executed. And they said they have some decision points coming up in January, asked if we can reconnect later. So I'd propose that I'll get back with them in late January. They thought they'd have some decision points by mid-January, so that would be good timing. The other project is in Barnstable, and this is a rail trail extension from a particular intersection in Barnstable to the Barnstable Sandwich town line. They've been holding public meetings to gather, to discuss the plan. They've been getting some inputs. We've seen some of them in the newspaper, actually. They have multiple potential routes that they're considering. Point of contact there that I was given by their town administrator is the director of DPW in Barnstable. And I've emailed him. I emailed him in early December. I followed up again here after the new year, waiting to hear back. So it'd be interesting to find what they're doing regarding rail trail extension, since we're at the other end. And that's it. Any other issues? Are we frozen, or there seriously are no other issues? You never know today, because we've had such bad connectivity.
Our brains are frozen. We're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I move to adjourn.
I would just like to say, fantastic job, Lance and Peter, with all your research. Really appreciate it, man. It's great.
Yes, I second that.
Yeah. Enthusiastically. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Hey, thanks, everybody. I know this has been a long meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
See you next
Everyone,
week.
take care.
Oh, what time on Friday is the meeting, at 9?
Yeah. Does this work? If we do 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Mine is great.
Okay. 9 it is. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
I
Uh,